The sprint backlog is the fuel for the development team, who are the engine. And as a Scrum Master, if your team doesn't have a strong backlog, you're toast. Hi guys, welcome back to Project Management 101. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today we're diving into the sprint backlog, what it is, why it's important, and why you need to care about it as a Scrum Master. Before we start today, why don't you smash that like button if you get some value out of the video, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. We're going to be focused on Scrum ceremonies, and then we'll dive into how to bring Scrum to life in the real world before moving on to some other project management topics. So what is the sprint backlog? The sprint backlog is basically your work list for your squad. It starts with its number one priority down to the lowest priority items, and it's a list where there's no equal priorities. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and so on. And it's really important that we work with all of the different Scrum roles to create the backlog, to make sure we maximise the benefit and the flow within the team to be able to move forward and deliver customer value as early as possible. The items on the backlog may include product deliverables, such as we'd like to implement a feature or we'd like to create a new website or whatever it is, and we'll break it down to appropriate levels of detail so the team can move it through the board. We talked about that last week. It's really important that they're broken down small enough that you can move it through the Kanban board within a sprint within 1 to 2 days. The backlog may have stuff further down that's not broken down to that level of clarity and granularity, but things that are closer to delivery will be broken down to much more detail, and we'll have much better understanding of what they are and much more accurate understanding of the way that we need to implement the work. In terms of the way that we might interact with it, this is our work items, right? So the team take the top item that they're qualified to undertake or they're willing to upskill to be able to do and start working on it. We don't start halfway down. We don't start at number 2. We start at number 1. And it's really important to say this is the fuel for the engine that is the team. Getting it right will maximise the team's success and the chance of creating shippable products much more quickly. The reason why the backlog's so important for the team and the wider community, maybe the stakeholders, is it's really clear and transparent. It shows what we're working on right now. It shows what we're going to be working on next. And it shows what we'll be working on in the future. And working with the product owner, we're able to manage expectations much sooner and much more clearly. I think another call out here is it really helps us and our stakeholders to visualise the amount of work that we actually have to do to be able to deliver a piece of work. And that's more powerful than you think. Additionally, it helps us within the team visualise how much work we need to do, and it helps us hold ourselves to account when we're committing to our sprint goals to make sure we are genuinely confident that we can meet the goals. It also helps the team to focus on doing the most important work, or maybe the most complex work, at the beginning. So we're removing the complexity earlier, and if we run into issues, it allows us to spot those early and maximise the opportunity to still get the value out that we need. Another really important aspect of the backlog is it feeds into the day-to-day work of the team. It feeds the Scrum life cycle, thinking about sprint planning and thinking about actual execution of the work within a sprint. A great benefit of the backlog is it allows us to handle change in a really controlled way. We can bring anything into the backlog at any point. Not to the sprint, to the backlog, which means priority number 1 today might be priority number 2 tomorrow, and we get something else in. And as we go into our next sprint, we can refocus to make sure we are delivering the change as quickly as possible. And finally, the backlog's really important to support with a real-time performance view. Are we going to meet the expectations of our deliverables, our overall goals within the organisation, not only within the Scrum team? Have we got some issues? Do we need to adapt what we're trying to deliver now? Can we get ahead of it earlier? It gives us some great performance indicators and metrics, along with some of the other Scrum metrics that allow us to give that real world view and update our stakeholders and our leaders early. So we now know what it is, and we also know why it's important, but what should we actually include in a backlog? Well, the answer is everything. So if we're working with the product team, understanding the aim of the overall product is really important, and we should work through a couple of iterations of understanding and breaking our backlog down to be able to then perform iterations to deliver it. So if we're starting brand new, we might do something called Sprint Zero, where we spend the time working together as a team to understand what the challenge is, what the aim of the overall product or delivery is, breaking that down into appropriate epics, features and stories to allow us to break it into multiple Scrum teams if necessary, or come together with a bit of a prioritised list of these are the steps and sequence of events that we need to follow to be able to deliver the work. So using tools like product-based planning allow us to break down the different levels of work that we'll need to undertake. An epic level piece of work may be build the checkout page of a website, whereas I might have some features such as security of that, billing and payment acceptance, customer details entry, the database, for example. They're examples of features, and then under each of those features will be a number of user stories. As a user, I need to be able to input my credit card information to be able to validate, check out and pay for the goods and services that I've received. I'm just making that up on the spot, and I'm not a user story documentation expert, but it's a great example of the breakdown between an epic, a feature and a story. So depending which level you're working at within Scrum, maybe you're working in Scrum of Scrums, you might care about features, but at a squad level, you're going to care about user stories, but understanding their relation to the wider parent initiatives allows us to visualize the overall state of the delivery end to end, and that's really important. Whilst we want to carve out and deliver value early, we need to do that in a way that we can deliver a total thing. So that could be multiple Scrum teams working together, doing individual components, but we need to plan and understand that together so we deliver alongside each other and make sure we can actually get something shipped, ultimately delivered, and out of the door to the customers so we can test value, experiment and take feedback back into the next iteration sprint. So coming back to answering the question of what should you include in the backlog, the answer is everything, but within those controls. The other side of that might be technical dependencies. It's great that we want to build a website, but what about all the technology that underpins that? Do I need a database? What does my DevOps engineering process look like? How do I hand over into support? All of those things need to be defined, and they should work within the Scrum team to define those and make sure that the tasks are included in the backlog and make sure they're prioritized alongside the product outcomes. It's no good getting a shiny website if you can't stand it up and deploy it. I would also say it's really important to minimize the length of your backlog. You can have a backlog that's growing for years and years and years, 4, 5, 6, 700 items, 300 of which you're never going to do, you're never going to touch. You can put it on the backlog, but a good practice would be to limit it to 3 to 6 months maximum. And I think it's really important to really focus in on if it's close to your proximity, i.e. your next sprint or the sprint after, when you're going through the refinement process, and we'll talk about that in a future video, the refinement ceremony, but when you're thinking about that process, to think about anything that's near to you should be broken down to a good level of definition so it's understood, and I touched on that a little bit earlier, versus things that are further away. You want to break those down less. Needs to be less mature in terms of your thinking, and we call that the cone of uncertainty. So taking that principle, and I'll pop an image up on the screen of what that looks like. The things that are closer should be more well defined versus the things that are further away should be less well defined. As a Scrum Master, it's our job to make sure that we're working with the team and facilitating the conversation to the right level of definition, and we can use that with definition of ready, and then we can challenge when we're going too deep, going down rabbit holes on things that are 6 months away. It's not important for today's conversation unless there's a critical architectural dependency, in which case we want to talk about it and bring it out earlier and make sure it's higher up the priority list in the backlog. And the final point around the backlogs is thinking about the priority. As Scrum Masters, we're not accountable for the priority of the backlog, the product owner is. However, we do need to have our ear to the ground and be listening out and making sure that we're focusing on the right things. Return on investment, value to the customer. How about time factors? What's urgent? What's critical? What do we need now? And why? Why is it important? Does it really add value? Should we challenge that as a team? And then should we give the product owner the right data to be able to go back and have a conversation that somebody maybe doesn't want to hear because it's the right thing for customers and the right thing for value now? And that's where we all play a part within this Scrum Master, development team and product owner to surface that data. The backlog is the tool for doing that. So there you have it. Now we understand the role of a Scrum Master, the product owner and the development team. We understand how to run a great daily stand-up, and we've got a great backlog. We're going to dive into another Scrum ceremony next week, so make sure you're subscribed and make sure you tune in so you don't miss out. It'd be great if you drop a comment below. Let me know, did I miss anything that you'd include on a backlog? Let's continue to grow this great community. I really value it. That's all for this week. Thanks so much for watching Project Management 101. It's great to see you, and I can't wait to see each and every one of you next week. From chaos to clarity, take care.